Hello and welcome to CNBC TV18, India's budget headquarters, as we decode what Budget 2025 has delivered. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presenting her 8th consecutive budget, and it's been a record-breaking budget for many reasons, not just because it is her 8th, but also because she has delivered on the promise of providing relief to the middle class. We had gone into the budget with the focus on the 3 C's, Capex, consumption and consolidation, and the budget has managed to deliver on each one, but consumption clearly has been prioritized in Budget 2025. Joining us now is the top brass of FICCI, Harshvardhan Agarwal, Anant Goenka, Shubhrakanta Panda, and Naina Lal Kidwai. Naina, gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. Harsh, let me start by asking you, as I pointed out, prioritizing consumption, giving in tax relief, much more than perhaps what was expected and anticipated. On balance, your big headline from Budget 2025.
Thank you, Shireen, for having us with you. Yes, I think, the tax relief up to no tax till 12 lakh, that's a very welcoming step, from the finance minister. Yes, it has been the expectation from the industry, as well as, our recommendation from FICCI to the government that, yes, we should give some relief on tax for the middle class. But yes, we were not expecting, to the level of 12 lakhs. So it's a very welcoming move, and certainly it will help the overall consumption.
It will help overall consumption. That's the hope, and that is what the budget promises to deliver on. But Anant, let's talk about Capex, and perhaps, it is short of industry's expectations, but, as I've been pointing out, the government has been signaling the fact that Capex has perhaps peaked at that 11-12 lakh crore rupee number, coming in at 11.21 lakh crore rupees, both on Capex as well as consumption, the dual power of what that could mean for growth.
Yes, we hoped for about a 15% increase on the 11.11 lakh crore investment. That didn't happen. But I'd still say that there are a lot of other indications that signify continued investment in the longer term. 100 gigawatts of nuclear power over the next 20 plus years. I think that is no small number that will result in a lot more investment in power transmission, distribution, and other investments that will come in. The Udan scheme, where you're talking about regional connectivity, more airports, I think that's another big announcement. Jal Jeevan Yojana, I think that's another one. So across the board, there are underlying signals of continued investment in Capex for the coming year. Yes, about 10%, 15% lower than what we expected.
Yes, certainly lower on that front, but more perhaps made up for or offset by the boost as far as tax measures are concerned to drive consumption. But Naina, let me come to you now with what the budget has delivered and what you believe this could do as far as accelerating growth is concerned. The budget pegs nominal GDP growth at 10.1%. What do you believe that this could do in terms of amplifying growth momentum from here?
I think what you've heard in terms of consumption and demand is a big amplifier. Capex itself is a big amplifier. There was very clear mention of the MSME sectors and continued focus on that, more so on the labor-intensive MSMEs, special mention of footwear, leather, toys, service sectors like tourism, because employment generation is not just employment generation because it provides jobs, but because it will be the accelerator through demand and consumption. So for me, these are very important aspects. I would just add on the point of infrastructure, almost a relief that the funding plans for the Jal Jeevan Mission and Swachh Bharat Mission continue to see focus, because these are very critical urban deliverables for health and also for the way we keep our rivers clean. And all the sectors, I was just seeing the numbers and the increases then, whether it's the National Ganga Plan by 13%, River Basin Management increase of 70%, Jal Jeevan Mission by 198%, Swachh Bharat 145% increases. So the success government has had in the implementation of these projects is giving them confidence to be able to spend further, because the absorptive capacity of these sectors has demonstrated that they are able to spend this in a meaningful way.
Well, let me welcome Vijay Shankar onto the program as well. Vijay, let's talk about manufacturing, the National Manufacturing Mission being announced. Of course, details awaited on the operationalization, the focus on labor-intensive sectors like leather, footwear, toys, specific mention there of making India a global hub for toys. Even on the exports front, of course, work in progress that will identify sectors and measures that are needed to amp up exports. But on balance, as far as Make in India 3.0 is concerned, what does the budget deliver on?
Budget has delivered a lot on the operational front, Shireen. I think, you spoke about exports and, the export promotion mission between the Finance Ministry and the Commerce Ministry, as well as the Bharat Trade Net, allowing people, rationalization of rates across TCS and TDS. There are a lot of operational improvements which I think really improve the daily work of an exporter who is meaning to do more and crack open new export markets. Including the announcement by the FM on the fact that on transfer pricing you don't keep provisional assessments open for beyond 3 years. I think these are very major steps in relieving the lives of a daily businessman from very many hassles that he has to undergo today. I think there's a huge focus on manufacturing. I think as Anand said earlier, the focus on the nuclear sector is, apart from the labor-intensive sectors that you spoke about, the focus on the nuclear energy is big. I'd like to also draw your attention to the focus on the shipbuilding and the shipping sector. Extending the tonnage tax relief to inland ships is a big benefit as they want to focus more on inland water transportation. Focus on import relief for equipment in the shipbuilding sector. Again, I think the marine sector has got huge potential in India. We have just a very small portion of the world trade today as far as ships go, hardly 1 or 2%. And I think the finance minister has focused a lot on that sector.
Yes, he certainly has focused on some of those sectors. But let me get Shubhrakant into the conversation as well. Shubhrakant, of course, plenty on the tax front, the direct tax code, the simplification, etc. Taking that forward as far as both TCS, TDS is concerned. Even on the customs duty side, significant changes being announced. On balance, your big headline from Budget 2025.
Well, Shireen, I think the real takeaway from this budget has been the finance minister delivering on our request, and I think everybody had made the point about putting money into people's hands, and I think she's done it in spectacular fashion. Because 1 lakh crores, is no mean amount, and that will find its way into the economy, that will find its way into consumption, and provide a much needed impetus to the growth momentum. But I think the common thread for me, which stood out through the budget presentation, was a focus on reforms. In fact, the FM specifically referred to reforms as the fuel of growth. And in this context, I think talking about strengthening the rules-based approach to a trust-based approach, I think is what will pay a lot of dividend going ahead. And in that context, the measures like the Jan Vishwas bill and many other recommendations that we have made have found its way into the budget. So I think money in people's hand is important. It is going to flow into the economy going ahead, and the focus on reforms to me are the big takeaways from this budget. Of course, many other aspects in addition to the infrastructure outlay, etc. The funds for creative redevelopment of cities, I believe, is very significant, because as we grow as an economy to cross 5 trillion and more, our cities are going to get larger. They need to be better managed. They need to be more easier to live in. So I think we are really seeing the building blocks of a real modern India being put into place.
Okay, Mr. Kanabar, you're perhaps going to be the busiest of our panel this afternoon, sir. I'm sure the phones are ringing off the hook, trying to understand the many changes that have come in, not just for personal income tax, but also, the simplification related to TDS, TCS, safe harbor rules, the GIFT City, and so on and so forth. What would you say were the key highlights as far as the tax part of this budget was concerned? What would you rate this budget on the tax front?
So before I come to just a humorous comment to say that if the new direct taxes bill, as it is proposed to be introduced after a week, is as simple as she makes out, then maybe I'll have to look for another job. So, but that's a separate matter altogether. But having said that, lots and lots of changes and lots of very welcome changes, Shireen, because if you look at it, most of the changes, for example, you go back and say that your price determination for transfer pricing is not for 1 year, but for 3 years. That's very, very welcome. Similarly, if you go back and say that you have a presence in India, but that is only for the purpose of exports, that will not constitute a taxable presence. Again, very, very welcome. Then again, since the sunset provisions being extended for startups, etc., by 5 years, most of the provisions of the gift city being extended by 5 years, again, all very, very welcome. The extension of gift city to leasing of shipping, again, very, very welcome. So huge number of changes. There are some small changes which are a cause of concern. There is, for example, a retrospective amendment on a Supreme Court judgment in the case of safari retreats. I won't go into all of them. But overall, I would say from a tax perspective, a great attempt to simplify and provide a roadmap for the next 5 years rather than deal with a year at a time, which I think is very, very welcome.
Let's talk about what this can mean now as far as the immediate term is concerned for consumption. And Harsh, we'd started to see a pickup as far as rural was concerned. Urban was still feeling the pinch. After what has been announced today by way of tax relief, how immediate do we expect the change to be, the pickup to be? Are we still talking at least a few quarters out?
Shireen, I believe, because this has the potential to bring the money in the hand of the consumers, but yes, it might not happen, immediately from next month. I would say maybe, at least we need to wait for another month, another quarter or so before we see the impact of this on the consumption. But apart from this step of the tax reduction, there are many other areas, which has the potential to improve the consumption, the things that she has done for the rural, the agriculture. So it's a very inclusive budget, where again, if the income at the farm level, at the agriculture level increases, so that also has the potential to boost the consumption. These things also, if the consumption increases, it will help in improving the private investment, which we all are talking about, it's not growing or it's not happening as per the expectation. So I think this is a big move, and this has the potential to impact in many ways in the economy.
Yes, Anant, going back to the changes, and we've also seen, even as far as the auto sector is concerned, specific changes. In fact, the customs duties on CBUs has been cut across cars, and I'm given to understand across two-wheelers as well. Specifically from the auto sector's point of view, anything, and of course, lots there on the clean energy transition, batteries, and so on and so forth. Anything there in specific that you liked?
Yeah, I think there was a boost towards electrification. So there was a fair amount of mention on a battery, on rare minerals, and making that more accessible for battery manufacturing and storage. Recycling of battery is likely to get a fair amount of boost over time, and general mention of clean tech across the board. Besides that, I would say there was not much else. We are seeing fairly positive headwinds today on the two-wheeler sector and on the farm sector, positive tailwinds on SUVs. I think it is the CV and passenger segment that we hope to see increase, but not much mention on the budget, largely on the auto sector, except for a thrust on making EVs more real.
Yes, and there is, of course, an allocation there as far as the PM e-Vahan scheme, etc. is concerned. But Naina, now the budget is done. All eyes shift to the MPC and whether we will see a rate cut being delivered by the MPC. But, two questions there. One, do you expect a rate cut? Two, between the budget and a rate cut, do you really expect a pickup as far as private capex is concerned, which is the ask of the government? And my second question, with the changes that have been brought in as far as the new tax regime is concerned, do you anticipate that we'll now shift, whatever was remaining on the old tax side will now shift, and it'll be the sunsetting on the old tax regime, because the insurance companies, for instance, reacting negatively to that because the tax breaks don't exist on the new tax regime side.
So I think, Shireen, it's a journey. The direction is right. Are we ever happy with what we get? No, we always want more. Does private sector Capex go up just because demand and consumption is addressed to some extent through the changes in this budget? Not in itself. So the issues in terms of challenges of ease of doing business, the way trade might develop, even while we look through thrust exports with all the advantages of presenting and being part of a global supply chain with the China +1 type of strategy, is happening at a time where tariffs are going up, certainly from one of our biggest trading partners, being the US. So there are headwinds in trade and exports, which may in fact get in the way of our own thrust in exports. So we can only do what we can do, putting domestic consumption, job creation at the local level, domestic tourism, etc., is in our hands. And even while we push to be part of that export chain, I just think if I can come in on finance and related areas where there's been some stress, as you well know, in microfinance, and I'm glad to see that got mentioned in this budget with the Grameen Credit Scores framework for SHG members being looked at, because we really don't want to get into the situation we had many years ago in microfinance, or indeed in personal loans, where the credit data does not allow us to capture multiple loans by the same individual. So focus on that, focus on revamping the KYC registry. These are all going to be helpful in terms of the financial infrastructure that we need to help that growth and consumption. And I think if we can also look at what the advantages on the mergers and acquisitions, FDI and insurance bring, these are significant for those industries specifically and should not be forgotten.
Yes, point well taken there, Nena. And of course, just continuing with that, the measures that have been undertaken for MSMEs, including the change in classification, credit guarantee enhancement. Shubhrikant, what does all of that bode as far as the MSME sector is concerned?
So, Shireen, as far as the MSME sector is concerned, I think there was a lot of focus on that, and rightly so, because MSMEs are the backbone of any economy, and India is obviously not only not an exception, but is perhaps even more so in our case here. So something that we have been advocating for, which is an increase in the threshold of the definition of MSME, so increase in the threshold pertaining to investments and turnover, that has been granted, as well as a higher limit for the credit guarantees. So all of that will help, bring more money into SMEs, make credit available. But that apart, I think the general focus in terms of, even the export promotion mission, where it's not just the commerce and the finance ministries, but also the MSME ministry which comes into play, I think is important. We are in a situation where domestically speaking, our fundamentals are very strong. We have the benefit of a unified domestic market, but unquestionably there are external headwinds, and that is something that cannot be ignored. And in that context, I think MSMEs need hand-holding, and this budget does have plenty on offer in terms of hand-holding MSMEs, and see that they continue to play an integral role in India's growth story, thereby making growth more broad-based, more inclusive, and also with a positive impact on jobs. Because as you know, I think the most important outcome of supporting MSMEs is a boost to job creation, especially when a lot has been talked about the labor-intensive sectors, which will get special attention in this budget.
All right, Mr. Kanabar, I'll give you the final say before we close. There's a lot of cheer, a lot of optimism, and a lot of confidence that the budget seems to have delivered on. But many of the announcements are work in progress, are yet to be operationalized. So on balance, where does this leave corporate India? Where does this leave the consumer? And where does this leave our aspiration to try and move beyond that growth range of 6.3 to 6.8%?
So first, you had asked a question earlier that does this mean a death knell for the old tax regime for individuals? And the answer is absolutely yes. If there was any doubt for any taxpayer, individual taxpayer, as to whether they should now migrate to the new tax regime, the answer is yes, they would, because it's far, far more beneficial. And you're very right that nobody wants to have deductions, which can be cantankerous. One would rather have a simple tax regime. Second, there was one mention about, and this is only a policy announcement, about a fast-track merger. And I wish that comes sooner rather than later, because NCLT today is overburdened with work. It takes months and months before a merger gets approved. And if a fast-track merger can be announced, that would really ease a lot of tension on NCLT. Coming to your question, this is a very forward, but is always a work in progress. One will wait to see next week as to what does the new income tax bill say. And that, of course, might go to a standing committee, and whenever it gets enacted, if it is indeed simple, it could be a harbinger for a lot of more foreign investments to come into the country.
All right, gentlemen, we will leave it there. Naina Lal Kidwai, Vijay Shankar, Shubhrakant Panda, Harsh and Anant Goenka and Dinesh Kanabar. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much to the top brass at FICCI for joining us here with your quick analysis of the budget that's been delivered by Nirmala Sitharaman. And the hope is that it will unleash the animal spirits, not just of corporate India, but of the Indian consumer as well. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up on CNBC TV18. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with more.